Thank you. Yeah, that's actual intelligence, as in human beings. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you about three things, which are loosely called slime, slop, and sabotage. Not to be taken too literally, but it's quite a nice kind of alliterative thing. It just rolls off your tongue. And you'll see some out for you messages underneath images and things. The idea of that is to give people who can't see the images so well a bit of information about what's in them, or at least it's a screenshot of an article in Wired or whatever. So trying to kind of make what could be quite an inaccessible talk just a little bit more accessible. And you'll see a mystery geodesic dome with a radiation warning label on it. We might talk about that later on. I'm going to try and rattle through this as quickly as I can, because we lost a few minutes playing with HDMI leads. So let's see how that goes. I should say these slides will all be online later on. I'm going to post a URL to them, and I'll pop it on Mastodon, and I'll pop it on the OggCamp matrix as well. But really the subtitle here is Why the Confusion Happens. And this is something, you may have seen this from a certain popular AI model, and when it sort of starts backsliding and vacillating, it kind of goes, oh, you see, this is why the confusion happens. And really, my message to you here today is that you can be the reason the confusion happens. And this will make sense as we go along. But there is one thing that we need to do before we really get started. So, sorry about this, but it's just how it is now for everything, really. So I just need to quickly check that you are all human. I'm not going to do that, actually, but I think it would be quite nice to, if everyone could just do a little beep for the robots. Could you do that? A bit louder? Yay! And could we have, wouldn't want furries to get left out, so could we have a woo for the furries? Oh, very nice. Thank you. So I'm not forcing you to verify that you're human, but I think you've done it quite effectively, actually. And so there is a QR code. It's a helpful QR code. I'll just leave that on the screen for a moment, and there will be a link on my website, which is martinh.net. And I was just waiting to hear, that's actually a QR code for a very important media file, which some of you may be familiar with. It's actually a chiptune, Never Gonna Give You Up. This is the real QR code. And that's kind of my point of my talk, is that a lot of people, particularly people stood on podiums at stages at events and writing in newspapers and appearing on TV and what have you, they tell us a whole bunch of stuff. That link doesn't work yet, by the way, so teasers. It will later. They tell us a whole bunch of stuff, and some of it, you just want to be a little bit thoughtful about it. So we're going to talk about generative AI. We're going to talk about the nature of reality. What is real? And how can we shape that? People are trying to shape it for us. How can we contribute to that and shape it in ways that we would like to? And Sabotage. The Sabotage is a game that everyone can play. It's something for the whole family. There will be, I've called it trace amounts of slop, but you had one already, that screenshot from the friendly chatbot. And I don't know, has anybody seen any orphan sources? Any Geiger counters gone off? Not yet. Good, that's encouraging. And there may also be bonus tetrapod content from time to time. Oh, thank you. There's one there. Yeah, so that whole thing about the nature of reality, There's a fancy term for it, epistemic damage, and you sometimes see it called epistemic violence. People trying to control and shape what we think is real. And this is not a conspiracy theory cult. It's, it's literally what you're exposed to every day. You open a newspaper, you turn the TV on, you get an algorithmically curated feed of stuff in an app which you think is what's going on in the world. But some things are real, and indisputably, like the autonomous spherical republic of Kugelbugel, which is in a park in Vienna. Has anyone been to Kugelbugel? Disappointing. I would say, if you've got a bucket list, becoming a citizen of Kugelmugel, think about it. It could be good. But it's a real thing, probably. I mean, I've never been there, but I'm assured. And actually, I'm assured by Wikipedia, which has become one of the most trustworthy, most authoritative sources of information. That's an interesting turnout. And there's a place, I'm going to mangle the pronunciation here, I'm sure, called Baal Hertog in Belgium, which is real, probably, and is noted for its complicated borders. So I don't know if you can make this out, but on the image on the screen, we've got a whole load of yellow, and we've got a sort of lighter colour, just sort of pastel, vanilla sort of colour. The yellow is Belgium, and the lighter colour is the Netherlands. So the complicated borders between Baal Hertog and Baal Nassau, one of them is in Belgium, the other one is in the Netherlands. And also Baal Nassau is noted for its complicated borders with Baal Hertog. There's one just there. So literally, the tables on the left-hand side of this picture are in the Netherlands, and then there's some tiles with a little plus, 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 plus. That's the border. This is an EU border between two countries, and I think there's something like 30 of those in those two towns. If you've ever, if you're familiar with the story The City and the City, then this is kind of, it's quite on brand. And someone's just put up a swing which you can sit on, and you can swing between the two countries, and under Schengen, you can do that. That is a thing that you can do, currently. Or so we believe. On the other hand, there are things that aren't real. They're definitely not real. So, for instance, Peter Thiel is not harvesting the blood of the young. And I feel like I have to be very clear about that, because we wouldn't want anyone to think otherwise. And there's some lovely tetrapods on that picture, which is purely coincidental. They just look nice, and I happen to, thank you. Just happened to have them on my screen when I took that picture of Peter Thiel with vampire fangs, which he absolutely does not possess, as far as we know. But there are some people who are harvesting the blood of the young, or were. This particular company has gone bust now. They're called Ambrosia, and they would sell it to you. So I think it was $8,000 a litre. That's a screenshot there of a shopping cart. Someone has loaded up a couple of plasma infusions from young people's blood. This is a real thing which really exists, or existed. It's kind of come back again. The company that did this originally went bust, and they kind of reinvented themselves, but there's quite a few that are doing this. And there's a medical technique called parabiosis, which is where you sort of connect the bloodstreams, let's say, of two creatures together, and they live in a sort of symbiotic relationship. And we should probably keep our eyes on that. That could be a thing. Peter Thiel not consuming, as far as we know. And then Something else that feels quite strange and maybe ought not to exist in our reality, maybe there are some ethical issues with this. Human brain organoids on a chip. And so people use induced pluripotent stem cells to, from a blood sample, maybe from a young person, to create brain cells. And then they put them on a chip. And they put what's effectively cerebrospinal fluid on, it's nicely lubricated. And they can play Doom now, apparently. And they grow up so fast. And there are several startups that are doing this. So that this was kind of cutting edge science a few years ago. And it's now becoming a product. And that's quite hard for me personally to get my brain around. You know, we're saying, oh, we'll just, you know, just grow some brain cells and, you know, maybe they can do other things. You know, they could probably do spreadsheets in between Doom and other things. It's all good. When I first heard about this, I thought, whose brain cells, actually? And, you know, I'm not going to hark back to Peter Thiel again, but, you know, imagine if a bit of you lived on forever, like Henrietta Lacks, you know, a bit of you lives on forever, a slave to the machine. You're a brain cell inside a chip, inside a data center somewhere. It's not quite like that because they culture them from nothing. They don't kind of pop your skull open and scrape a little bit out. So these brain cells don't know anything better. Are they conscious? Do they have a soul? Do they feel things? Don't know. No one's asked that question really yet. Maybe we should. And slime molds. Yeah, so this is the tenuous connection to the slime in the title of my talk. This paper, actually, I think is absolutely wonderful. It's called Perspectives from the Annual Slime Mold. And I like to picture the slime mold, you know, kind of saying, you know, I'd like to interject, if I might, for a moment. There are people who are trying to use slime molds as a kind of primitive computing device, and you can get them to do things like solve mazes. Now, whether that is actually a demonstration that they could be useful in like general purpose computing or something, or maybe they're just very good at solving mazes, remains to be seen. But the point of this part of my talk is really that there are stranger things in the world than we might necessarily have known about or imagined, and some of them are real. Let's imagine that you're the boss of a big company, you're, you know, a go-getting founder who's got all kinds of big plans. Imagine people saying to you, you know, well, what's your slime strategy? You know, what's your plan? Because, you know, get on board the slime train, or, you know, you'll be left behind. People will laugh at you. They'll point at you and go, hey, you're not even doing slime yet. Never mind organoids. And of course that's not happening yet. But we do know that that's happening in another area. And I'm just gently moving us into that area. Through the medium of talking about cults. So that whole thing of like, well, okay, people aren't gearing up to sell you slime mold anything just yet, as far as I know. But of course a lot of people are gearing up to try and convince you that you need to embed AI into everything that you do. And some people have, let's say, just taken this really to heart, and you know, we hear phrases like one shot. This person's now one-shotting their development or stuff like that. It's a little bit alarming for me. I'm a kind of hobbyist developer now, and I maintain a couple of projects, and people send me code, and sometimes I look at it and I can understand it, and yeah, okay, I see what's going on here. But sometimes I get a pull request which is just I'm going to stereotype by saying 10,000 lines of unintelligible gobbledygook. But you know, it compiles, and it runs, and it sort of does what we expected it to. How do we feel about that? And if challenged, this has been a real eye-opener for me, is that if challenged, those people will generally get extremely defensive. You know, everyone's doing it. What do you mean? Like, come on, get with the program. And this does make me wonder. So it does make me wonder about cults and how easy it is for people to become enmeshed. Oh, thank you. How easy it is for people to become enmeshed in cults, even imaginary ones like this tetrapod cult, which does not exist. There is no such thing. And there's a good example of this actually from just after World War II. So I talked about this a little bit at Y, so apologies if you heard that talk. I won't do it all, because in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. But after World War II, a lot of people, certain people, mostly in America, had access to nukes. And there was a whole swathe of ideas about, well, you know, we've got these nukes, what can we do with them? And so Project Plowshare, a related project which was part of that called Project Carryall, that was all about, you know, maybe we could use them in civil engineering. You know, we want to make a new highway, there's a few inconvenient mountains, stuff like that. Just nuke them, you know. What could go wrong? It's fine, you know, it's all good. And this was a real thing. I'm not making this up. Well, I found it on the internet. It must be true. It was even on Wikipedia. And this is an example of the kind of thing. So when I said, you know, there's an inconvenient mountain in the way, well, what if we just dropped 23 nuclear bombs on it? You know, I'm just going to boop, 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 boop. And what do you know? The mountain is gone. Okay, there's a slightly inconvenient giant crater, but you know, we can kind of fill that in. And this was not taken as some kind of wild-eyed conspiracy theory madness at the time. It was like, yeah, okay, maybe we should give it a try. Of course, they didn't just say, you know, okay, who's going first? They actually did do some analysis. There were lots of discussions. There were committee meetings. Probably like the committee meetings and management meetings that some of you have been to, where people are saying things like, you know, should we get into this, what's it called, model context protocol? That sounds like it could be a big thing in the future. And you might go, well, I'm not so sure. Lots and lots of meetings, lots of reports. So this particular one, you know, it concluded, well, it can be done safely. So California Highway Engineering Department, well-known nuclear experts, concluded that it could be done, and it could be done for significantly less than the conventional method of constructing highways. Does that sound familiar at all? You know, we're going to do this thing, which might possibly seem a little bit destructive, but it's going to save us money in the long run. They did consult safety experts, and actually the safety experts, the actual nuclear safety experts, in the most polite possible way said, "You're out of your flipping minds." Except they didn't say that because they're academics and they're taught to, you know, not kind of go overboard on things. So they said, well, you know, there might be one or two problems with this. And there's a sort of impedance mismatch there, which I feel very strongly when I see the AI safety conversations, because it's like there's this real enormous, gigantic, crater-sized hazard, or, you know, asteroid hurtling towards the planet. And the people who are being asked, well, is this okay? They aren't used to really kind of thumping the table and saying, you've got to be out of your mind, this is incredibly dangerous, we shouldn't do this. So they did get quite far. They got quite far with this plan. I would say it was eventually cancelled, so this did not happen, which is probably for the best. But there were lovely little vignettes in the reports, like, oh, there could be occasional rock projectiles. Let me see, so up to 1,200 meters from the explosions. And, you know, one of the places they were proposing to do this, there was a town nearby, but the people could always go and live somewhere else. It's not really a problem. And actually, you know, we said it would save money. Well, you know, we don't actually know what the nukes cost because that's classified, that's a secret. But I'm pretty sure it could save money. And again, does that ring any bells? And, you know, yeah, sure, we're going to use this agentic AI system and it's going to save us loads of money. The salesman said so. So, you know, if you if you're part of this conversation around Project Carryall, Project Plowshare, all these statements on this slide, these bullet points, it probably seemed entirely rational. You know, what is your nuclear excavation strategy? I mean, come on. Like, you want to save money, and there's a thing I didn't include here about missing toes. I'll leave you to look that one up, but it's not a Fallout reference. It's a geological thing. You know, but everyone's doing it. So, you know, don't want to get left behind. And that leads me to, this is really my primary point, which is when we talk about AI, what's very common is that people will say, so yeah, if we just kind of put the ethical stuff to one side, you know, we've got this incredibly powerful tool, and I mean, I'm purposely drawing an analogy here with nuclear explosives. We've got this incredibly powerful tool. It can transform all kinds of things, possibly into giant smoking craters in some cases, but it's incredibly powerful. We can do so much with it. If we just put the ethics, that annoying stuff, just put that to one side. So yeah, you know, we all remember this, right? So a couple of years ago, Google's AI overview was saying, well, you know, you put some Elmer's glue, I think it is, on your pizza, and it will stop the cheese from sliding off. And of course, the reason it did that was someone posted it. I think it was on Reddit, and you know, so also source for eat a small rock every day because you know experts recommended it, and these very credulous AI training systems just hoover all this stuff up. And the big lie in all of this, the thing that we trick ourselves about, we try maybe not to think about, is when you get found out, you put what they call a guardrail in place. So you go, no, we're not going to say that anymore. That guardrail applies to that specific situation. It doesn't mean that it's not going to give you wrong advice or, you know, tell you the wrong kind of mushrooms to forage for in the forest. It doesn't do any of that. The guardrail is just about that one particular circumstance. So that's not ideal. And then kind of diving deeper into the ethics. So this is from last September. Screenshot from Fortune, but it was quite widely reported. And there are dozens of similar stories. So if ever built, and of course we know that's a real question, a lot of these data centers might not get built, but if the data centers that OpenAI were envisaging got built, in this particular example, they would use close to the total electricity demand of Switzerland and Portugal combined. So this is just like, you know, a few data centers versus entire countries. And we've seen similar examples where, you know, one data center would use the same amount of electricity as New York, the same amount of electricity as San Diego, San Francisco. And if we put the ethics to one side, then we don't need to worry about that. It's fine. It's all fine. Some of us were over at Kraken earlier on, and their co-founder was saying, yeah, data centers. Yeah, you're running your GPUs at full tilt. If someone tells you to stop doing that because actually there's not enough grid electricity to go around, but he didn't say this, I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, we want to kind of flex in response to renewable energy supply and battery storage. But these things don't really want to flex. They want to get the biggest bang per buck. And there's been a lot of talk about water consumption, and a lot of it is sort of unsubstantiated. And I thought this was very interesting. I call them thirsty ghosts because I like to come up with these tortured metaphors, but Thames Water are actually saying, well, we don't really know. We don't really know how much water the data centres that people are putting planning applications in for right now are going to consume. Oh, and yeah, don't forget we do actually have hosepipe bans and kind of long periods where we're in a drought situation. So I didn't include a slide on this, but there's a cunning plan to use treated sewage to cool AI data centres. And now I'm wishing that I had included that slide. I might retcon it onto the online version. And yeah, copyright. Yeah, that's another one of those annoying ethical things. It's great that we've got this tool that we can just go to and say, summarize anything. Write me a love letter in the style of, James Joyce or something like that, and he'll go, yeah, sure, boss. How do you know how to do that? Wow, how did it know? And there's a screenshot here of this rather wonderful article where there was some whistleblowing about Meta allegedly torrenting their training data from sites like Anna's Archive. And a wonderful quote from a staff member saying, yeah, it feels a bit wrong to be doing this on my corporate laptop on the corporate network. And I feel like there was probably a reply that said, so do it at home, yeah? Or something, just don't get caught. But there we are, and the result of that is, I'd like to thank Matthew for this, so the result of this is that we can now talk about sloppy pasta, which I managed to slide in here at the last minute. So once upon a time, copyright and intellectual property were super important, and people would, fight you in court over it. And suddenly they don't matter. Or do they? Maybe they do for some people, but not for others. Maybe they matter if you're a normal person, but not if you're a gigantic corporate entity. And this should give us pause for thought, because the normal people, like translators, artists, musicians, they've gotten a bit of a rough deal out of even just the last couple of years. If we say, what does the future look like if these things are not addressed? Well, the answer is maybe it's just a hobby. Maybe only a handful of people can make a living doing these things. Maybe that's wrong. And we could talk all day about Mecha Hitler and what I've called here artificial intelligence. But the very idea that a chatbot which one day is talking about its fascist leanings is the next day providing core services to the US government. Actually, that's probably not too surprising when you think about it right now, but that should not be a thing, and we shouldn't be getting into bed with people that do this kind of thing. I didn't put a Palantir slide on, but you can imagine a big Palantir logo popping up and then disappearing again. So yeah, there's all that, and that's not even the half of it, because there's the abuse of the humans involved in training the models who've had a pretty rough deal. There's a whole load of stuff. And one that I'm personally quite exercised about is just not being able to get to anything anymore. Everything is locked away, it's paywalled, there's a web application firewall that stops you getting in because it thinks you're a bot. And this breaks the open web, it breaks our concept of the digital commons. And it's pretty rubbish. So that's why we have tetrapods. This is to liven things up, make us feel good, make us feel a bit more positive, a bit more upbeat, and just don't ask an AI to make you one. So this was a little experiment I did because I 3D printed a tetrapod lamp, which was designed by, thank you very much. Designed by a chap called Ripper, some of you will know from MetaLab. But I thought, well, what AI models can do all kinds of stuff. Maybe it can write me an OpenSCAD model, which is like a computer program that turns into a 3D model. And yeah, sort of. And it's when you see something like this that the full enormity comes home to you, because it doesn't know what this is. This is just some words. It doesn't know that these bits are meant to be joined together in a particular way. They're just words. And, somewhere in its training data are some OpenSCAD examples. And it's like, oh, yeah, I can kind of auto-complete this. I can do something with this. There's no way of knowing that it's done a pretty lousy job. Before anyone jumps in, I'm aware of a mixture of experts, RAG, there are all kinds of techniques to get more AIs to check the output of the first AI. But go back to the ethics question, if we think that perhaps the beginning place was a bit dodgy, do we want to go further? So we have so many questions, but really it boils down to there are real harms here. There are real harms, and do we take those seriously? Or do we go, sucks, but yeah, sometimes you've got to nuke a few mountains, it's just how it is. And there's this little interesting bit, just last but one bullet point. What happens when the inputs are the outputs? What happens when you get into this recursion, this feedback loop where it's garbage in, garbage out? What could go wrong? And that's what we're starting to find out. And big one for me, when you challenge somebody who is a true believer about this, what if proof denies faith? Well, if you know your Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that's the moment where you disappear in a puff of logic. But remember NFTs? They were such a big deal once upon a time, and everything was going to... Mercedes built NFTs into their Mercedes dashboard, and they turned out to be so very fungible. And in fact, they are almost entirely funged by now. But there was a time when you would be a weirdo for even questioning the fact that these things are going to be huge. Except in this community, I suspect. And so, we've got a couple of minutes to talk about sabotage. Can I have a woo for anyone who's interested in sabotage? Thank you, my work is done. There's lots of ways you can sabotage things. So, some of you will know the CIA's Simple Sabotage Field Manual. And that has lots of advice which if you've worked in any large, complex organisation, you will see that people have been translating into practice for quite some time. Maybe we could have a meeting to talk about this, or perhaps you could write me a report about this, or much simpler things. One of their bits of advice is just spend a long time in the toilet, more than you need to. But I feel that could lead to questions being asked, so we need to be careful. And then in the world of AI, that big question, it didn't tell you to put glue on your pizza for no reason. It told you because someone wrote that somewhere. It got hoovered up into the training data. And so my humble example, I've been doing this for a little while, is to create this festival known as Excitable Magnetosphere Fiesta, which happens roughly every couple of years in England. And apparently there are some rumours of some fictitious thing called electromagnetic field, but that you should ignore those. There are rumours that they have a giant inflatable tetrapod at EMF. I don't know if this is true or not. Oh, thank you. And summoning rituals and all kinds of strange goings on. Just ripping a few of these things into the data sphere, like this strange rituals video here. You can see this exotic hexagonal tetrapod equipped item. I'm looking at her, but she's not realized. Don't worry, it's okay. So let's imagine, thank you, perfectly timed. Yeah, let's imagine that, this is it's just a bit of fun. This is not serious. But it does mean that you have a demonstrator. You have something, I could put all kinds of stuff which is consequential in there, but I just put a few little jokes and things scattered around the internet. This itself, of course, will become training data once the words that I'm saying have been auto-transcribed and put on YouTube or whatever. And we asked a popular AI, and it said, well, there's no orphan sources at EMF, and this is where the radiation warning label on the opening slide becomes relevant. I'm completely sure, absolutely. And there is no such thing as an orphan source village. Just asked about that for no reason at all. Definitely not. These things do not exist. And in the detail of the AI response, it goes on to explain why that kind of thing would just not be appropriate for a family-friendly festival. And then, of course, when challenged, and this is a good, useful technique to adopt if you have some enthusiasts that you would just like to kind of dampen down a little bit, give them a little bit of a reality check. Often when you say, are you sure? The answer is, actually, maybe just one or two are orphan sources, and actually even that's wrong because there were two, if I remember right, and a well-known attendee in a furry suit. But actually there is an orphan source village, or there was. And, this is quite fascinating for me because our notion, that epistemic reality, our notion of what is real, what is true, can totally change just in the context of one conversation with one of these AI bots, agents, whatever we want to call them. So there was a whole village at EMF which was all about radiological safety and, and the history of radioactive objects. Oh, nice. But no orphan sources, definitely not. No radioactive bits and bobs that maybe got left behind at the swap table. Not that I'm implying that anything like that is going to happen here. And there certainly wasn't a uranium pallid xylophone. Come on, that's just ridiculous, right? Like someone would make something like that. That's clearly totally implausible. Of course, when I took these two pictures, I was fairly convinced that that's what I was looking at. But I have now been told, my epistemic reality has been informed that this is not actually real. So, when I was saying earlier on, as far as we know, I feel like I do know this because I was there and I took those photos. I even zoomed in so you could see the bit where it says radiation and stuff. But often we don't know. We don't know, and we're just taking a stab. We're following advice, and this kind of, feels right, sounds about right, it looks okay. And this has led me to conclude that actually we need to do something. We need to do something about this. This is a problem. And the good news is, anyone who has access to the internet can help, because all you need to do is put stuff online. And you don't need to put stuff online which is illegal or inflammatory or anything like that. Even just a little whimsical thing, that's us running out of time. Even a little whimsical thing like I showed you around EMF could be quite helpful in illuminating and exposing how these tools actually work. You know, if you'd used a frontier AI model with all the mixture of experts and blah, 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 you could have had better results. But the tools that I showed you the outputs from are the ones that normal people use. And some of those normal people are actually, you know, government ministers, you know, your doctor, your financial advisor. So, yeah, I think it's worth considering. If you've followed along and you thought that perhaps a little bit of sabotage from time to time might be advisable, you know, maybe there are some things that you could do. And yeah, don't forget the slime mold. It's a bit of a slow burn, but they have 720 sexes, and they can heal themselves from injuries, which is quite handy. I feel like we might be hearing more from them. So this is my final slide. You can download my t-shirt, or you will be able to when I post the link to the slides. And by all means, follow me on Fedi. And if anybody wants to talk about this stuff some more, if you've not had enough of it yet, 3 o'clock tomorrow, there's one of the unconference sessions, which is literally just let's get together and have a chat about this, and you know, no preconditions, no strings attached, and I will bring tetrapods. Thank you very much.